Very good evening, community. Thank you for being here again, ready to scare yourselves, ready to enter a world where the darkest dreams are possible, where the limits of your skepticism, wherever they may lie, begin to crack. Above all, thank you for being here today because we are about to venture together into the depths of the forest, a place of complete darkness, where no one can help us anymore, where no one could hear you scream. Be very careful the next time you enter one, the next time you go camping, because the people who shared their experiences with us tonight never thought they would become the protagonists of tales like this one. The Fallen Witch. Good evening, community. I think I'm one of those people who didn't believe in the paranormal, no matter how many strange things had happened around me. Even people I completely trust had told me terrible experiences with little room for doubt. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to believe or even entertain the possibility that such things might be real. Finally, it was my turn to experience something and become one of those people telling a story, only to see doubtful looks from others, other skeptics who would only believe if they came face to face with something like this. If I'm honest, even though I'd love for you to believe me, I wouldn't wish an experience like mine on anyone. Not even on those who think I'm crazy or who have dismissed those of us who lived through what I'm about to recount. This happened very, very close to Mexico City, in a place where it's common for people to go camping. I'd rather not name the location, because I know curiosity could lead many to go there. If they do so unprepared, they could put themselves in terrible danger. It all began on a camping trip I joined at the last minute, and I wasn't even eager to go. It was a trip organized by my girlfriend Mariana's group of friends. She often goes out with Sophia and Diana to these kinds of places, always accompanied by Jamie, Sophia's boyfriend, and Alfredo, who has been on and off with Diana for years. Even during the worst moments of their relationship, their shared passion for camping kept them connected. However, on this particular day, when they had everything ready to go, a bigger fight than usual broke out between Diana and Alfredo. This time, it was bad enough for Alfredo to back out of the trip at the last moment. So Mariana called me and asked me to go with them. She knows I hate camping. I've tried it before, but it's just not my thing. The idea of being uncomfortable for a couple of days just to connect with nature doesn't appeal to me. I understand why she likes it, but it's simply not for me. Even knowing this, she told me she had a bad feeling about the trip, but she couldn't cancel because of it. She said she'd feel safer if I went. Not just because I'd be another man in the group, but because she knew I'd always take care of her. So, I couldn't say no. I informed my family, finished some pending work tasks, and grabbed everything I needed to head straight to Sophia's house, which was the meeting point. I don't know if these things have a name or if it's something you feel when you're about to live through a traumatizing experience, but from that moment, I noticed a strange atmosphere. At first, I attributed it to Diana and Alfredo's fight, but then I realized it went far beyond that. There was a weird vibe, indescribable. But instead of thinking it was better to cancel the trip because, let's be honest, no one would actually do that, everyone focused on saying that once we got to the forest, everything would feel better. They said the fresh air, the trees, and distancing ourselves from the city and its stress would calm us all down. For a moment, we managed to forget about it, joking along the way. And when we left the car behind and started walking down the trail, looking for a place to set up camp, we all felt much more relaxed. Perhaps because we had momentarily let go of the fear, we made decisions I now regret. The spot they usually use for camping was already occupied. Moving a bit further, we found a couple of groups already camping. One of them was quite loud, apparently drinking, and judging by the time, it seemed like they'd been at it since the previous night. I'm not sure if it was Sophia or Diana who said that if we stayed there, we'd eventually get annoyed or have trouble with them. That's when Jamie suggested a different location, one only he had been to. However, it required us to venture several kilometers deeper into the forest. Jamie knew the area best. He assured us it would be tiring, but said there were beautiful spots along the way, perfect for resting, and that no one else went there, at least not the casual campers just looking for a place to drink. It was a tough hike, yes, but he swore it would be worth it. And since, as I mentioned, we had already forgotten our nervousness and wanted to avoid the rowdy groups, we decided to go for it. God, how I regret that decision. We walked for a very long time. Little by little, we grew quieter, made fewer jokes, and grew more and more exhausted. After hours of hiking, we suddenly noticed movement among the trees. We stopped, startled and surprised, when we saw several people in the underbrush. A pair, 5, 8, about 20 people suddenly appeared. They froze, stopping whatever they were doing, seemingly as surprised as we were. I slowly moved closer to Jamie, asking him where he had brought us, if this was private property, and if we were in danger. He told me he'd never seen anything like it before, but assured me we had nothing to worry about, saying they couldn't possibly be bad people. As he said this, he pointed toward an old man behind the group. The man was dressed in black and wore a clerical collar. He was a priest. We greeted them, but we got no response. Instead, we kept walking for a while longer until we distanced ourselves from them. However, we noticed that a couple of young men, perhaps in their 20s, had started to follow us. They were trying not to be noticed, but their presence was still very obvious, especially because of the silence in the area. Every step they took off the trail was completely identifiable by the crunching sounds. Finally, we reached the spot Jamie had been searching for, and it was absolutely worth it. The pine trees surrounding us, the tranquility, the calm, the view, it was stunning. It felt like something out of a medieval fairy tale, and I couldn't believe such a beautiful place was so close to the city. Now, though, that very thought haunts me on sleepless nights, the idea that this place is so close. We settled in and prepared everything to eat, exhausted and starving. After resting and eating, we began to joke around, feeling much more at ease. It was then that we realized the only sound we could hear was our own echo. The wind had stopped suddenly, and there was no other noise, not even from the insects or birds that you would normally expect in a place like this. As it started to get late, I felt very sleepy even though the sun had just set. I stayed back talking with Mariana and Diana while Sophia and Jamie went for a walk. Then we heard it, a sound. It was like a distant screech, almost like a buzzing noise, coming closer through the treetops. Then we heard what sounded like people praying and running among the pines, getting closer. We stood up, adrenaline surging, staring into the underbrush, waiting for something to appear, maybe to attack us, or something worse. We considered climbing to a higher spot where we could see more of our surroundings, and moving away from the campfire, which was fully visible from far away. But before we could decide if that was the best option, the noise in the trees grew closer, and we suddenly heard something very heavy fall to the ground just a few meters away in the darkness. Whatever it was massive. From the opposite direction, we heard something running toward us, but then we were relieved to see that it was Sophia and Jamie. They were terrified too, having heard everything as well. They said they hadn't seen anyone, but they felt as though people had been running very close to them, brushing past them in the darkness. We all had the same sense. Something was near us. We needed to decide whether to hike back to the car, even if it would take hours, or try to endure the entire night there. Something moved among the trees. It sounded like something dragging itself, or at least that's how it seemed. Maybe it was an animal, someone suggested. Summoning our courage, we decided to spread out a little to investigate. Jamie went alone. Sophia joined Diana with another flashlight, and I walked in another direction with Mariana. We weren't planning to go far from one another, just enough to cover more ground, while staying within sight of the nearest flashlight beam. Then we heard something in the distance, in the direction Jamie had gone. We noticed his flashlight had stopped moving. Its beam illuminated something beyond our line of sight. Sophia and Diana called out to him, asking if everything was okay, if he had seen something, but he didn't respond. His flashlight remained still. We couldn't see him, so we decided to approach. Sophia and Diana were just a few meters ahead. It was a relief to see someone in the middle of all that chaos. But something about the woman didn't feel right. She seemed completely calm, as if she wasn't in the same forest as us. Her clothes were worn, her face expressionless, and she walked slowly, climbing the path. Diana, still gasping for air and on the verge of tears, tried to explain what was happening, but the woman just stared at us silently with a piercing gaze that sent chills through us. Finally, she spoke in a hoarse, deliberate voice. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't have come. This place isn't for you." The way she said it was more terrifying than any scream or shadow we had seen until that moment. Mariana began sobbing, while Sophia tried to calm her. Jamie, visibly angry and scared, demanded that she explain what was going on. The woman ignored him and continued, "There's nothing you can do now. They've already seen you." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. Desperation took hold of us. Jamie insisted that we had to keep going down, but Diana, exhausted, couldn't move. Mariana and I tried to help her walk, while Sophia yelled that we couldn't stay there for even a second longer. The woman, with an almost sympathetic expression, pointed to the forest behind us and said, "They're coming for you. Don't stop. And if you see something, don't look at it directly." After saying that, she turned around and continued her way, disappearing into the shadows of the path. Terrified, we resumed our escape. The screams returned, now closer than ever, surrounding us as if they were hunting us. The shadows among the trees seemed to come alive, and we could feel the presence of something behind us, something we couldn't see but knew was there. Finally, after what felt like hours of running nonstop, we reached the end of the trail. The truck was still there, its lights on. Jamie and Sophia were inside, shouting for us to get in quickly. Without hesitation, we jumped into the vehicle, and Jamie sped off. No one spoke during the drive back. Only the sound of our breathing and the tires on the road filled the air. When we finally reached the city, we said our goodbyes without exchanging many words. That night, I couldn't sleep, and in the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. We will never go back to that place. And if anyone ever asks me about the forest, I'll only say one thing. That place isn't for you. She gestured for us to follow her, saying, this way, and we walked toward her, hoping she'd at least show us somewhere to hide. We followed her from a distance and left the trail. What happened next is very hard to describe. We began to hear screams, very faint and distant, as if we were underwater. Screams from Jamie and Sophia. Their voices seemed to echo far behind us, as if they were hundreds of meters away. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we felt their arms grabbing us, trying to stop us. They appeared in front of us, trying to get us back to the trail and away from where we had been heading. They asked what we were doing, and we told them we were following the woman to find a place to hide. But when we turned around, she was gone. There was nothing where we had been heading, just a deep ravine, an endless darkness we were unknowingly walking into. We returned to the trail with them, and where there had been nothing just moments earlier, the truck we had arrived in suddenly appeared. We climbed in, locking everything. I asked why we weren't leaving, and Sophia explained that they had drained the gas from the truck. We could try pushing it down the hill to see how far it would roll, but it likely wouldn't take us far. We found some duct tape and used it to tape clothes over the windows, blocking out any view inside or outside. From time to time during the night, we heard voices and saw figures. members of the group we had seen earlier in the morning, running downhill. Eventually, we managed to fall asleep for a little while until the morning came. With daylight, we decided that Jamie and I would go back up for our belongings, while the girls would head downhill to get some gasoline. After about half an hour of walking uphill, we came across some men from the group we'd seen the day before. They were yelling into the forest as if looking for someone. This time, we approached them. They said they were searching for their priest, who had gone missing during the night, vanished as if the forest had swallowed him whole. We told them we were heading to our campsite and would let them know if we saw him. They asked if we had stayed in a particular location, describing perfectly where we had set up camp. When we confirmed, they told us that there was nothing left of our campsite. They had passed by earlier and said it looked as though animals, dozens of beasts, had torn through it during the night. They warned us not to take anything back from the campsite, saying that whatever remained there now belonged to the forest and should stay there. We decided to trust them and turn back. When we arrived at the truck, we found a family, a young woman and 2 children, helping the girls. They were surprised we had even stayed there overnight. The family gave us enough gasoline to leave and warned us never, ever to venture that far into the mountains again, especially on nights like that one. They told us that there was a reason no one ever crossed beyond that point, beyond that boundary, into the forest. And with that, we left, never looking back. But the wind outside didn't stop, and as time went on, the noises began to change. At first, we thought it was branches hitting due to the strong wind, but it soon became evident that it was something else. A dry, rhythmic sound, like something heavy walking around our tent, started to circle us. Enrique tried to calm me down, saying it was probably an animal, maybe a deer. But whatever was out there was larger and heavier. Suddenly, we heard scratching on the fabric of the tent, as if something or someone was touching it. Determined, Enrique grabbed a flashlight and told me not to move while he checked what it was. As soon as he unzipped the tent, freezing air rushed in, and with it, an eerie silence. Enrique stepped out with the flashlight for a moment, but quickly came back, pale and silent. At first, he didn't want to tell me what he had seen, but after I insisted, he whispered, there was something standing among the trees. Something that wasn't human. A chill ran down our spines. We decided to stay inside the tent, praying that whatever was out there would go away. But the sound continued. Heavy footsteps, whispers that seemed to come from several directions, and occasionally a high-pitched shriek that faded into the darkness. When dawn finally came, we quickly stepped out of the tent to gather our things and leave immediately. But what we saw outside left us speechless. Around our tent were dozens of deep footprints in the snow, as if something large had been circling it all night. As we got into the car, we noticed nearby branches were broken, and some of our belongings had been moved, as if someone had inspected them. While driving back down the road, Enrique confessed to me that what he had seen that night was a tall, thin figure with glowing eyes that reflected the light of his flashlight. It was like a shadow, but it was alive, he said, unable to hide the fear in his voice. Since that day, both of us decided never to camp in La Rumorosa again. Whatever it was that had been with us that night didn't want us there. And every time I think about that experience, I wonder if we really left that place alone or if something followed us in silence. As the night went on, an almost unsettling silence began to surround us, giving us a very real sense of the loneliness we were in, or at least, that's what we thought. Around midnight, I woke up startled by a dry sound, like branches breaking, which echoed very close to the tent. Enrique, sensing my tension, opened his eyes and remained silent, listening. The sound grew louder, closer, but now it was also accompanied by a deep, guttural noise from something very large, about the size of a horse, moving slowly around the campsite. He told me not to worry, that it was probably just an animal that confused by the snowstorm, had strayed from its herd or ranch, or maybe it was a deer. He had seen several in the area, especially at night. He grabbed a lantern and, with great caution, opened a small hole in the tent to see what we could make out. What we saw made our hearts stop. It's not an exaggeration. Literally, I couldn't breathe for a few seconds. A creature was moving slowly around our camp. It was the size of a horse, but its body seemed disjointed, as if its limbs were twisted at impossible angles. The most terrifying thing was that, as it moved, we could hear its bones creaking. Its head was very strange, with a structure similar to that of a primate, but without skin, with exposed bone from the nose upwards. It had no skin, it was only bone. I held back a scream, while Enrique quickly turned off the lantern. The beast just sniffed the air as if searching for something, as if it couldn't see us. We heard a low growl, followed by the sound of snapping branches. The creature was dangerously close. Minutes passed. I know it was only minutes, but at that moment, it felt like hours, until finally, the beast seemed to lose interest in us and the camp and walked away. Its footsteps and the branches it crushed echoed in the distance until they completely faded away. I don't know how we held on until dawn, but finally, it came, and with it, our decision to pack everything up quickly and leave that forest as soon as possible. As we gathered our things, we noticed deep marks on the ground between the mud and snow and broken trees around us, evidence of the creature's passage, proof that it hadn't been a dream. Years have passed, but that night in La Rumorosa is forever engraved in my memory. I've never dared to tell my father about it. I don't know what it might trigger in him. His story is probably very different, as La Rumorosa is full of mysteries. But one day I will know the truth. And believe me, I will share it with you. Good night, community.